Welcome to Tech Leaders Today with your host, Cassie Crossley. All comments, views, and opinions expressed on this show are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers. Now here's Cassie Crossley.
Hello and welcome to Tech Leaders Today. I'm here with Duncan McAlynn. He is the principal engineer at Ivanti. He is an information security professional with 20 years of experience with a laser focus on systems and security management. Duncan is driven and a passionate IT professional, contributing author, editor to several books, magazine publications, and websites, as well as a popular presenter at many Microsoft events. Welcome, Duncan.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. The security topic is so upfront in the news today, and I'm sure that you are being contacted every single day for your knowledge and expertise. Can you tell a little bit about what you specifically do?
I am the principal engineer for Ivanti, but for the past year and a half, I've been with Heat Software, who recently just merged with Landesk, and that entity basically formed the Ivanti brand. But my role has been helping organizations be able to help protect and defend themselves against the onslaught of these threats that they're facing on a continual basis through some of our unique and proprietary third-party patching solutions that help shut down those attack surfaces and stop these threats from being able to realize themselves within those corporate enterprise systems.
You must be working every day with CISOs, those security officers in the companies. What do you feel are some good traits if somebody is looking to bring someone on to head their security organization?
Wow, that's actually a really good question. And yes, I do interface quite often with CISOs and different director levels, focused on security. And really the best ones that I've found realize very quickly in their roles that they don't know everything. Whether if they've come up through the ranks or they've been a outside hire, they have to realize that they need to surround themselves with some really smart people, right? Because like we've already said, these attacks are coming at us with such velocity and ferocity that there's got to be a wide set of skills that can match the threats. They need to be able to have solid teams that they're getting really good information from and being able to be actionable. One of the things that I'm seeing, and hopefully this will come true in 2017, is these CISOs have traditionally acted very much so in a knee-jerk state of mind, right? Responding to security incidents instead of acting as if these malicious actors are already inside of their networks, right? So that's one of the things that I think they're going to have a mind shift in 2017 is really looking at their environments, looking at their mission critical systems and treating them as if they've already been attacked, that there's a threat actor already inside of their network. And in fact, the average time for an organization to realize that they've already been breached is over 200 days. So this is not a huge shift from what they should already be doing. It's just acting in the appropriate manner and really taking a look at those mission critical systems, those business critical desktops, and making sure that they have the right mechanisms in place to protect those. But also key and instrumental to the recovery process is making sure that they have a solid incident response plan and that they're testing it out. A CISO that has some gumption would tell his staff, go through, take one of our mission critical systems offline right now. Take some of our business critical laptops off of the desk while they're at lunch. Let's see what happens. How quickly can we respond? And treat it as if that incident has already occurred. Those systems have been breached. Ransomware has already infected a payroll clerk's laptop, those kinds of things, and see what the response rate is.
Do you think that most people are willing to see their faults, though? Because let's say you're in that role and you do something like that and you find all the failures. That fire drill and finding all the gaps could be seen in a negative or a positive light.
You know what? Which way do you want to find it? The best way to find your vulnerabilities is to hack yourself, because otherwise it's going to get ousted. It's just a matter of time of whether if you're going to do it where you can keep it under wraps, figure out what the next steps are, how to close those vulnerable attack surfaces, and update your response plan as a result of that knowledge learned, or wait until you're actually hacked and that information is now being sold on the dark web for however many bitcoins it can muster up.
Do you think the CISOs are willing to take the risk? Do you see people wanting to go into that role because of how much liability they have? I don't know, maybe if something does go wrong, like what happened at Target, people get fired?
It's funny because as you were asking that question, the first company that popped in my head was Target. But yeah, I'm sure these guys that are, getting the offer letters for a new CISO role and stepping up into that position or making a lateral transition to maybe a more publicly visible organization, that's going to weigh heavily on their shoulders of, do they want to accept that responsibility? Because now it's not just the potential for termination, but also they're being held fiscally liable as well. And there's also the potential of civil lawsuits against that individual for negligence. Yeah, there's a lot of things that the CISOs have to deal with on a daily basis that a lot of us that sit auxiliary to that whole process don't take into account. So they do have a tremendous burden, and that's why organizations like Ivanti exist, to be able to help these individuals and their organizations rationalize what the level of effort is and what the solutions are that can help address those.
On the topic now of technology and the technical aspects of security, we are leading into that conversation of ransomware because we talked about data breaches. I think those are very obvious. But you mentioned losing information onto the dark web. This is becoming a global problem, but in the U.S., there are, I'm assuming, government agencies, other groups that can work along with somebody, because I keep hearing people get hacked, especially government themselves, local government. What is your thoughts on ransomware and what's happening today?
This is a topic I present on internationally all the time, and it's one that is truly near and dear to my heart. The onslaught of ransomware infections that's occurred over the past 3 years is just unbelievable. And again, it goes back to the velocity and veracity of these attacks. You're absolutely right. There's no regard whatsoever for what systems these malicious actors go after. And, they have very targeted and strategic attacks that are facing things like municipalities. Look at the Tewksbury Police Department. For several days, having police officers on the side of the road. And I'm a ex-law enforcement officer myself, so I understand what these guys face when they're on the side of the road pulling over a vehicle. Imagine not being able to run warrants, background checks on the individual in that car before you get out because your systems are offline because of some ransomware. Or the attacks that are targeting our healthcare institutions. Hollywood Presbyterian is another marquee example of systems being offline for 9 days and going back to pen and paper. These actors have no regard. It could be your mother, your sister, your child in NICU, that's not being able to get the proper medical care because those systems are offline because of some ransomware attack. So this stuff happens on a continuous basis. And like I said, there's absolutely no regard for what systems they're going after. They're casting a wide net and just hoping to get whatever they can from these ransomware payments. Now, there are resources to help, and you made mention of, government agencies that can assist. And I'm very proud to be a part of the FBI InfraGard division, which is basically the Bureau's partnership with the private sector to be able to help protect and defend our nation's critical infrastructures. And that includes everything from the power grids to you name it, but I focus on the technology sector, working with the FBI and being able to help bridge that gap between the Bureau and the private sector so that these organizations have the backing of the Bureau, the tools and resources to help recover from a ransomware infection, but also being able to assist with the forensics gathering. And that's one of the things that I coach people on during these presentations is If you do get attacked by ransomware, obviously your focus is getting these systems back online as quick as possible. But I urge you, number one, resist paying that ransom because, number one, there's no guarantee you're going to get a decryption key to be able to recover those files, from whoever infected them to begin with. But number two, you're potentially sending that Bitcoin payment into the money laundering system of the dark web, where it's going to further incentivize them to continue this behavior. Secondly, potentially financing additional criminal activities that could be everything from drug trafficking, human trafficking, etc. But lastly, also potentially funding terrorist activities against our nation. So I urge you not to make that payment. Protect the forensics of those systems. Contact your local FBI office or a member of the FBI InfraGard like myself so that we can bring those tools and resources to the table to collect those forensics and hopefully be able to pair that infection up with other infections, be able to get a profile of who these actors are, and ultimately lead to prosecution.
Does it lead to prosecution? Most of these attacks, I'm assuming a majority at least, are not out of the U.S. if you're working with the FBI. So what type of ability do we have to capture and prosecute?
You're right. In the vast majority of a lot of the attacks that we see in the media and what I get briefed on from the FBI InfraGard, they're coming from other nation states, right? So FBI obviously has ties into Interpol, and Interpol has ties into state law enforcement agencies around the world. So yes, there is prosecutions that take place. There was just a major sweep throughout Western Europe that wrangled up some 30 different hackers and crackers, if you will. So there are prosecutions that do take place. It is difficult, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that just because you get infected, call the FBI office, that we're going to, immediately be able to track down like it's, war games or something. But the more information that we're able to put together, the way that we can tie these variants of ransomwares to known actors and being able to get their fingerprints, so to speak, their digital fingerprints, the easier it is for us to be able to work with those international agencies to be able to bring these groups to justice.
How many do you think are being brought to justice?
Unfortunately, not enough, and I'll leave it at that.
Are there any success stories out of all of this where somebody was attacked and they were able to defend themselves? I mean, is it just too late once it happens?
No, actually, I just read earlier this week a situation where one organization was infected with ransomware. The demand was made, but actually, because of their own backup systems, were able to recover without having to pay the ransom. And ultimately, that is the key here because, if you can recover without having to pay up the Bitcoins to be able to get a recovery key, then you're basically just talking the hours or sometimes days necessary to be able to get that system or group of systems back online. First and foremost, make sure that you have good backups of your critical systems and that you're following the traditional 3-2-1 backup rule. If anybody who's listening to this doesn't know what that means, we're basically talking multiple copies in different formats and at least one of those being off-site. That's first and foremost. You have to make sure that you have good backups in place. But there's also technologies that exist today that can make ransomware a non-issue, and that's things like application whitelist, where an organization can say, only these permitted applications are able to be run on these specific systems. If that's the case, then it doesn't matter because those ransomware executables aren't going to be able to load up. And there are some vendors like Ivanti that provide solutions that get very granular in their control in that method and also do things with in-memory execution and everything else that help to protect. Obviously, we're talking about a defense in-depth approach. Everybody out there needs to obviously have any malware, any virus, installed on their systems, just as a precaution. But that is a very reactive approach because first we have to know what these malwares are to be able to have the signatures to recognize them or some type of holistic mechanism. But then we talk about things like application whitelisting, device controls, so you can control what information is being accessed from connected peripherals, whether it be an external hard drive, a USB key, those kinds of things. And then getting down into things like third-party patching, making sure all those applications are up to date with the latest patches for known vulnerabilities, etc. There's definitely some things that these CISOs need to be looking at if they haven't already considered these within their organization. And actually, Microsoft is making huge advancements in the security space. What they're doing with advanced threat analytics and being able to map out after an organization has been breached to be able to see all the impacted endpoints and user accounts, mailboxes, etc. What they're doing around Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection to be able to help stop these infections from occurring in the first place. And the list just goes on and on with everything that they're bringing to the table is the largest security response center in the world, and all the billions of authentications and attacks that they're facing themselves every day. These CISOs also need to be sitting down with their Microsoft team and being able to look at the existing technology that they're bringing to the table as well as what their futures are bringing. And there's so much going on there that actually I'm right now in the process of authoring a book on advanced Windows security and all these solutions. And there's basically 20 different chapters in the book just talking about what Microsoft themselves are bringing to the table.
Most of the reports that I've seen have been related to on-premise databases and networks. Do you see any kind of ransomware or major attacks in cloud providers?
It is coming. I assure you, they are going to be looking at things like man-in-the-middle attack, authentication mechanisms, credentials, phishing schemes, a huge opportunity there for these actors to be able to do things like sending out an email that looks like a Salesforce.com password reset sent by their administrator. Those emails, because it is a cloud-based solution, tend to not have as much personal information as something that would be an on-prem email notification coming from, let's say, your IT organization or your immediate manager. So it's a lot harder to tell those apart in a phishing attack, right? So yes, I do see that as a huge threat coming into this new year. And last year, as part of my 2016 security predictions, I did talk about the threat of these actors going after our databases. Because what happens when you're looking at, let's say, a systems management console or your ERP solution, SAP, etc., and you're not able to trust the data that you're looking at because it's been altered by some type of malware that is now being held ransom. And imagine if it's something that is externally facing. So you have some back-end databases on premise, but you're engaging with a partner, consumers, business-to-business, collaboration, what have you. And now you're not even finding out about this infection until you're getting responses from your consumers, your partners, your business partnerships, etc., that are now questioning why you're hitting them with these altered database, results. And I see that continuing to be a threat this year, and it was actually late last year that my prediction was made a reality with MySQL databases being under attack.
Wow, that is scary. In fact, the Salesforce email that you talked about, you're right. I just had one. We were doing user acceptance testing and regenerated, and I received my email and clicked on it without 2 seconds of thought. And with the MySQL attacks and everything else that you've mentioned, I guess you have to assume that everything is an attack. You can't be overcautious.
Exactly. And it's unfortunate that we've got to that state, but it is the reality of what we're dealing with today. One of the other things, and for those that are listening, I'm actually going to challenge you. because ultimately you're listening to this podcast because you have some kind of interest in these kinds of topics. Now, for those of you that may have a security background or that's part of your role within your organization, I'm going to call you out because it is up to us, those that live and breathe this stuff on a daily basis, to help educate our friends, our family, our colleagues on what the reality of today's environment looks like and what these threats are and how to handle these phishing attacks and, what you need to do, simple things like hover over the link, look in your status bar. Does the link match up with what you're seeing down there? Those kinds of things. Because ultimately, it's these friends and family that, guess what? They get up every day, they go into their job, and they are the ones inside of these organizations that are facing these challenges. And if we don't help educate them, who's going to?
Excellent point. How do people get in touch with you to find out more? Because this is such a large topic, and I'm sure they're going to have questions.
I'm very responsive on Twitter, so you can follow my Twitter handle, which is InfoSecWar, INFOSECWAR. Or in the podcast notes, you'll be able to see my About Me /McAlynn, my surname. That gives access to my Twitter, LinkedIn, as well as some other videos that I've posted on this topic and several others around security.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Duncan. It was so enlightening.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
I want to thank you so much for listening today. If you love this podcast, please do share it with your friends and colleagues. And please leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher because it makes a difference for circulation. For the show notes and other great info, enter your email into the mailing list at techleaderstoday.com. Thank you.